Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Andor episodes 1, 2 and 3. So today is the launch day for Andor. We got the first 3 episodes here, which was interesting. And yeah, it's an interesting one because I don't remember having this type of a reaction to like any of the other Star Wars, TV series, Disney Plus series. Admittedly, from announcement right up until I watched the episodes, my anticipation for this show was just like absolute middle of the road. Star Wars show, I'll watch it. Otherwise, nothing inherently stands out about it that makes me super interested in it, which is why I don't think I've really talked about it all that much in any of my videos. Then actually watching it, I was really surprised that just that general opinion sort of continued throughout the whole thing. And now having watched all 3 episodes twice, my reaction is still just that I think this show is alright. I liked it, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't blown away by it. I thought it was okay. I don't have like many criticisms other than the fact that it the actual plot events of what actually happened wasn't the most interesting thing we've ever seen in Star Wars. It was somewhat slow paced given that we got 3 full episodes. And I think you could tell if they only gave us 1, or even if they only gave us 2, people would have been left going like, what? The 3rd episode, I think, definitely helps to kind of, leave things off in a point that's actually quite good. But it does make me wonder, these individual episodes, I'm kind of a little bit kind of worried about them if it's going to be broken up like that, because the ending to both episode 1 and 2 felt rather abrupt. That very much these 3 episodes felt like they were meant to be kind of packaged together and not actually have anything that resembles like an episode break between them. So it's a weird one where, like I said, there's not much to criticize with the show, but I also think there's not a massive amount to super praise about it either. So that was the kind of interesting thing here, because I'd seen some of the early reactions to the show and I just came out of it feeling like, okay, there's some interesting stuff going on here. I understand aspects of these reviews, but a lot of it seemed very overblown in terms of how big of a difference maker this show is for Star Wars. Seeing a lot of the idea of Star Wars in TV has never been done like this before. And I understand that from the perspective of you could tell this was a very high quality production in terms of the sets, the direction, sort of cinematography, that sort of stuff was all really high. And I think on overall, consistently across 3 episodes, a higher level than I think the other shows. But the actual story, the characters they're using here, the aspects of Star Wars that make up Andor, I don't think are as interesting as a lot of the other projects going on in Star Wars at this point. So it's this kind of contrast in that way of why can't we have that level of production quality for these other shows? In that I don't think you have to only use this level of production when you're doing we're trying to do something a little bit different here. You can use this for other things as well. But even that feels like I'm being too harsh on those other shows. In that Mandalorian, Kenobi, Book of Boba Fett, I liked all 3 of those shows. And when you really break it down, it kind of just feels like each season of those shows had there maybe 1 or 2 episodes that were maybe clearly weaker than the others, that had problems that maybe felt like they were more on that kind of production side of things, of choices of shot, just kind of oddly placed kind of things, that doesn't seem to be present in Andor. So it's not just that, I think people are almost conflating the idea in that sense that, when you do the big Star Wars things that everyone knows, you end up with a bad production. When it's more like, no, you chose to do the amazing production on this show. And I think this can, and in a way, like, should be the standard for Star Wars going forward. Um, yes, by all means, continue to use the volume, but when you need to, like, do some of the stuff that Andor is doing here with its like use of sets and so on. So, um, just an interesting position coming out of this show where I did finish watching the 3 episodes and it was just like, yeah, that was fine. I'll watch the episode next week, but I'm not like super excited for it. And I think a lot of it is that I've seen a lot of general reactions to this show, but I've seen very few like in-depth analysis of what actually happens with regards to characters and story. And I think that's ultimately sort of the problem here, is that I think people see a lot of potential in this show because there's a high quality to it. But I don't think that many of the, the characters, plot elements, like, really stand out all that much. In that, the one, in a way, surprising thing in this is probably that they did seemingly kind of retcon, like, Andor's backstory, which they do address the retcon here, in that they say, like, what, as of like Rogue One era stuff that was in like data books, encyclopedias, it was said that Andor like grew up on Fest and all this other stuff about him. Here they change it, and it's like, actually he was born in this was it Kendari place, and the Fest thing is just a cover to avoid talking about where he's actually from, because it seems to be related to a notable kind of incident that happened on that planet. Obviously, I guess there's a few mysteries still to come out about that I'm interested in, because otherwise it seems like there was maybe a continuity error there, an error made in it, because what basically happens in the backstory is that you have a young Andor basically join up with, I guess, the hunting party or something like that. They go out to investigate a ship that crashes, and it's his first time, I think, taking part in this. Interesting stuff about this is obviously that it didn't really seem like there were that many adults, and then obviously just a slightly older teenage young adult girl is the kind of leader of the kind of hunt here. Along the way, we do get to see the mining facility, but we head out to the crash site, and we see that it obviously has crashed. There are a bunch of people who are dead, and they seem to be like poisoned in some way as well. Their like skin is all kind of green and stuff like that. She goes in on her own as everyone else stays back. She checks out the dead bodies, and we see that they are wearing uniforms that very clearly seem to have the Confederacy of Independent Systems, the separatist logo on it, which is the hexagon where the kind of opposite sides are joined up. That's clearly there. It's very clearly not the Republic logo. One of the guys that she walks past actually gets up, shoots her, and everyone else attacks, and so they have technically killed this member of the crew. So everyone else takes off their kind of leader, but Andor stays behind and investigates the ship. And again, the whole time through this, they're speaking the language of this planet. They don't translate it at all. It's not meant to be a thing like, say, Huttese, where they'd usually translate it. They just leave it to be, you are not meant to understand what the dialogue is, but just get what's going on from what's actually happening. So he goes in, and it seems to be some of his first time, I suppose, interacting with technology based on what they have for weapons, which is basically like blow darts and like arrows and stuff like that. He sees himself in the mirror, gets very angry, and starts smashing it up. While this is sort of happening, the reveal as it comes out is that the person he's kind of like living with ends up actually being the person who raised him. And so we see how she found him, is that she and her partner kind of came in basically scavenging for parts from this crashed ship, and they find him there. The error that seems to happen here is, I don't think it's necessarily this first part, but the droid comes in and is like, there's a Republic frigate incoming. You don't have that long. Like, we've got a couple of minutes to get in and get out, otherwise we will be caught. And they say, likely killed by the Republic. So that's interesting as well. The timing of this, it's interesting in that they actually put on screen that the present day story is set, 5 BBY. They don't do that when they go into the flashback. I think we know Andor's age, like, exactly. So I think you can roughly get the estimate of, like, yeah, I guess this roughly takes us into somewhere in the Clone Wars time period. So that does make sense. The error that happens is that she decides we have to take him with us, otherwise he will die. Like, I can't allow him to die. That she seems convinced that the second the Republic lands, they are out to basically massacre whoever they find. So she's sort of convinced that if she even just lets him go back to his people, they'll be killed in everything that happens. So let's save him while he's here. And they say, especially because they killed a Republic officer. And this is where, like, it feels like that's an error. Somewhere in the middle of this, there's an error, or there is something quite important that they just haven't told us about this scene. Because clearly, the people were wearing uniforms that are clearly separatist uniforms. But they're saying the Republic is arriving, and that they killed a Republic officer, suggesting that the guy who was fighting back against them is a member of the Republic. So was this some sort of spy mission? Is this just that they're using the same equipment that the Separatists were using, but it is actually under control of the Republic? Because again, the Separatists do have human elements to them. We typically see it mainly as the droids. But again, a crew of a ship, it makes sense that the Separatists would have that as well. So I don't know if we're meant to interpret that as an error or not, because surprisingly, and some people have praised the show for this, it is not taking the approach of, like, overly explaining much of anything that's actually going on. But this was a case where it's kind of like, is it an error, or are you just purposely not telling us the whole story here? I'm guessing it's going to come out. Otherwise, all that is told to us is that this place used to be an Imperial mining facility until there was an incident that basically killed everyone on the planet, more or less. So it eventually goes on to be taken over by the Imperial, so the Empire, meaning that at some point it must have been in control, I guess, of the Republic. But is that happening? Is that in the process of happening here? The Republic then becomes the Empire. Is it as simple as that, and it's literally just using old uniforms that still have the previous owner's insignia on it? I don't know. But there's that. So that's interesting, because obviously it's something we didn't know about Andor before. And then I like the idea that he then wants to find his sister. That, in a way, the main regret, I suppose, that is going to be with Andor and the way he was raised is that he was taken and not able to in any way find where or what happened to his sister. So based on what was told before, it seems to be implied that she probably died in what happened on the planet, but he seems convinced that she is still alive. Hence the opening scene of the episode, which, if you take it like literally, that like he was actually on the path of like a proper, he actually was on a lead, that she at some point worked in this brothel that he's in at the start, because they say that they used to have someone who was a girl from that planet. So I'm guessing she somehow did manage to survive and get off world. Now, how much will we learn about what exactly happened here? That's the interesting part of it. It suddenly means that, like, Andor's backstory, which was previously mostly told, that, like, I think what was said previously was that, like, he basically was quote unquote allied more with the separatist side of things during the early years of his life, but then when the Empire took over, he obviously went against them. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic. In the scene with I think it's Luthen, it is mentioned that, like, clearly something happened to Andor's father that Andor takes great issue with. Now, when we jumped into the flashback, we didn't see them as having parents necessarily. So, what's the deal here? Because I think the important point in all of this is that the the ship that crashes is not the first piece of technology to land on the planet. They clearly established that the mining organization facility has been there for quite a while. They've been doing a lot of work. They're aware that that is there, highlighting that they likely have opposed either the Republic or Separatists or both, occupying their planet for some time. So that is interesting. But again, they don't have technology themselves. So how recent or not is whatever has happened, I don't really know. But that is an interesting element of the show that I did appreciate. But the present day story is, again, it's surprising like how in a way little happens over the course of 3 episodes. In that, okay, while he's investigating what happened to his sister, he basically just happens to get the ire of 2 of the security guards who sort of follow him. They basically try and shake him down for money. He turns the tables on them, and I kind of like the way that this scene panned out in the sense that ultimately he completely like accidentally kills one of the guys. Like the guy who's like checking him from behind, he basically just reversed like headbutts him behind him. And that's that guy out and basically dead for the rest of the fight. He clearly just, takes a somewhat minor blow to the head, falls over, and just dies on the ground because he fell over. And then, because the other guy saw this happen, Andor takes him out. So it's again establishing that I think, like his first scene in Rogue One, this is a character who does what he has to do. And that's meant to be that sort of like dark kind of tone that we've kind of seen before in other Star Wars kind of media. And here it is again here. So this is kind of what prompts the entire episode, is that it's going to be investigated, the fact that 2 guards from this company have been killed. And people do have some evidence, kind of clues against him. It eventually leads them to the other guards. It's like, this is where it gets like a little bit like, in terms of like, they don't go massive into the details here. It's in that it's a corporate security is basically the idea here for this planet. And they're investigating deaths in their own ranks. And there's a connection to the Imperials because I guess the head of security is going to some meeting to report on what's going on there. So clearly this is an area where the Empire feels we don't need to put our own forces there, like stormtroopers there. We can just hire this security corporation to do it. So the idea is just that, okay, we get this sort of rebellion against this security guard force as a kind of prequel to, I guess, the Empire their attention will turn to what has happened here. And that's, they're bringing on bigger forces, and that's going to be one aspect of what's happening here, I'm guessing. So that was, again, somewhat interesting. Maybe wish they were just a little bit more clear-cut about that, because I was a lot of the time thinking, like, whoa, is this just a security organization? Like that, in terms of like, it's a general organization that you hire to do security wherever, or is this specifically meant to be like the police force for just this planet? And what's going on here? Because they mentioned something along the lines of it's like a company town or something like that, a corporation town. So they're clearly establishing that like certain big companies seem to own planets just for their business to operate, and so business security is a thing. Maybe they'll play on that dynamic as we go forward. That's, again, somewhat interesting. And that is a lot of kind of what ends up happening here. We see that some of the people that Andor knows, what's her name, Bix, she is his connection into what seems to be the actual rebellion kind of plot beginning to come into play, in that he has something to sell, he tells her about it, she contacts him, he arrives, and he wants the thing, but then ends up actually being much more interested in Andor himself as an agent, basically, and sees potential in him. And this is how, I guess, Andor is going to properly come into contact with the rebellion. That's where literally the 3 episodes ends, with them fully kind of taking off together. He has, for now, managed to sort of escape the kind of quote-unquote bounty on him, but it has left the town in a kind of somewhat bad position. Sure, they managed to turn the tables. They ultimately managed to sort of win the day against the security forces, but it's going to, I suppose, drop the Empire on them down the road at some point. And we have, what's his name? Tim does get killed in all of this. So, you know, the fact that there has been multiple deaths involved in this, like, something is going to happen here. The other character they seem to set up is sort of the, at least from our perspective, the main kind of up-and-coming guy within the security forces, who seems very, like, by the books, but then he seems to get a little lost in the chaos of everything, like, going wrong. He's trying to do his job effectively, even though the high-ups basically want to just brush this under the rug, that we actually don't care that 2 people were killed, because we can just explain it away as, like, they probably got themselves into trouble and got themselves killed. Leave it at that. That way we can just be like, you know, it was their own fault for it. And it won't go down on the statistics as being a crime. And we might get in trouble for having high crime statistics. So there's that sense of, like, kind of corruption in all of this. He wants to go by the books. Andor, I guess, lets him live. So that seems to suggest either he's going to come back for revenge, or he might, you know, turn around himself and go down a different path. Bix, even though I didn't think she stood out too much as a character, but I guess now her boyfriend dying, and there being that conflict over the fact that, like, he effectively kind of told on Andor and sort of brought them here, that led to a kind of breach in trust, but ultimately she seemed to still care about Tim in the end. That will be an interesting maybe arc for her to go on as a character. But it looks like from here on out, I guess episode 4 will probably have to be the introduction to, like, maybe the political elements, and because we know Mon Mothma is going to be in this show, so I'm guessing next time out we'll probably see Mon Mothma and the whole, you know, Andor being brought into the fold here. Other than that, what else is there? The new droid that we got here, I actually thought was quite cool looking. I liked the kind of red. I liked that there was kind of astromech kind of elements, but there was also, like, the kind of spinning, like, middle sections as well, and that it can kind of compress. That was kind of cool. There was a nice transition actually in the middle of this, where they cut from the kind of now older version of the droid into the flashback where it looked much newer. So that was interesting. So again, there's that production thing of just, like, they put the time into making that sort of shot transition look really, really nice. But it does leave her, like, the person who basically took Andor, in a kind of interesting position. She's obviously aware of that, like, he has left, but there's obviously going to have to be some things said about the whole idea of, like, more of her motivation, specifically about why she took him and what was going on there. But, you know, that was kind of interesting. Beyond that, like, is there that much else to say in terms of, like, because this is the thing, like, it's 3 episodes here, but the actual, like, plot details of what actually happens across the episodes isn't really all that much. I think for absolute sure, it really felt like episode 1 and 2 for sure should have been just grouped into one. Especially the episode 1 cliffhanger in particular just was like that. You literally just made a cut. No real effort made to, like, end on a note of anything in particular. You just cut it. So that was interesting to see. One thing I suppose I was worried going into the show is that I think in a lot of the earlier trailers we didn't really see any aliens. I was pleasantly surprised to see that they actually incorporated alien characters in pretty well over the course of the episode. Not too many of them, but making sure to always, have one thereabouts. That was something that I thought was nice to have as well. And then I think that's about it. I think for this one, it's very much just about sort of the early review of like how the show sort of feels, how it how excited am I in a way going into the next one. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next episode, but not to a crazy degree. No more than, say, Book of Boba Fett. I was looking forward to the next episode, and that sort of thing. But yeah, my main takeaways would just be that, like, yes, I think you can definitely notice production-wise, this seems to be of a higher quality. But what I'm more looking for in a way is, give me this level of production with an interesting story. Otherwise, this kind of more gives me vibes of, you chose a random Star Wars novel and you gave it a very, very good adaptation. And people are kind of surprisingly blown away by it because it feels a little bit different. And I think that might be some element of why a lot of people are having the reaction of, this feels very different and new and I'm liking it. And then I just kind of feel like, I've watched all these animated series for Star Wars, watched the movies, read a lot of novels, comics, that sort of thing. I've experienced a lot of Star Wars stories with all different types of tones, different focus on different things, including stuff that actually is quite similar to this, that is addressing early rebellion stuff, has a slightly darker tone. So this doesn't feel like inherently new or special. And then the whole idea that, okay, it's not including like the Skywalkers or the Force, like, fair enough. But I don't think the show should be necessarily using that as its tagline, because you are dealing with content that ultimately stems back to Palpatine in the background, that he's behind the Empire, that there are Jedi. That's where the core plot of what will actually take down the Empire is, yes, the rebellion itself, but also, Luke, Obi-Wan, and Vader, Palpatine sort of stuff. So it's like, it's connected to that. Like, that in a way, the reason they're telling this is because it is ultimately connected to the originals, and there's that as well. So I find it a little bit weird that you have a lot of fans out here really, like, hyping up the fact that it doesn't seem to be connected to anything, when it's like, no, it's directly, like, it's a prequel to probably the most liked new Star Wars movie, like, post Disney acquisition, and it's also a prequel to the original trilogy. So even that doesn't, like, quite work. So it ends up just being this thing where people are kind of being more like, I guess people are happy that there's no Jedi in this. Whereas for me, I've always kind of looked at, like, say, even the originals, and especially the sequels, as both being, like, groups of Star Wars media that don't particularly use the Jedi or Force users, like, that much, or as much as you would think. Like, the prequel era is the one that uses, like, Jedi Force users, like, a lot. Clone Wars, that sort of thing. But it's only really like Obi-Wan, Luke, Vader, Palpatine there, and then it's Rey, Kylo, tiny bit of Luke, in the sequels. And it's like, that's why I don't have, like, fatigue about bringing the Force back into things or anything like that, and would love to see more stuff about kind of Force users. So I'm kind of excited to see what the Acolyte is like, and if they would ever do something that is maybe a little bit more focused on the Sith, maybe involves Plagueis or something like that. I'd love to see them do something that's maybe like telling the Darth Plagueis story, making that canon again, and so on. So yeah, there's that. And then there's also just the sense of, like, I almost would say I have more fatigue with the building up the rebellion story than I have with anything else in Star Wars, because we've had Star Wars Rebels. I believe the Force Unleashed games basically had Formation of the Rebellion stuff in it. Now I get those games I don't think are considered canon at all anymore. I think they were like basically their own canon even before Disney kind of took over and did what they did. But there's been stuff, there's been books, other material that has addressed what the general idea of the formation of the Republic is. And if this is ultimately just going to be like another cell being formed, fine. But you have to do something more to make that interesting to me. Because it's one of those things with Star Wars Rebels where I almost felt that some of the weaker elements of Star Wars Rebels was the formation of the rebellion parts, if anything. So that's everything I want to say about it for now. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the first 3 episodes of Andor. How did you feel about it? Where are you at with it currently? And how excited are you for more episodes? I will say, one kind of final point is that I am interested to see how they do, like, I guess, the Mon Mothma arc once she's introduced. Like, I've always never really had a problem with Star Wars politics, the prequel kind of type stuff, and I've always somewhat enjoyed, let's say, the more political senator-focused episodes of the Clone Wars. So I'm very interested to see how they approach doing one of those in live action, and like what the Imperial Senate is, and what like a rebellion-aligned senator is going to do to make stuff happen. That I'm actually kind of interested to see, and maybe turn it more into like that political drama element. I think might add that properly, maybe kind of new feeling to the series that other people have been getting. But yeah, they're my thoughts. In the comments, let me know your thoughts. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.